You want to know the exact moment I decided to destroy my boss? It was when his 28-year-old son called my coat thrift store trash in front of 50 executives and asked if I was saving up to buy a real one. 3 months later, I fired his father and offered that same kid an entry-level job under my management. But let me back up. I'm Christopher Mills. I'm 47 years old. I drive a Honda that sounds like a lawnmower with asthma, and I've been the senior financial analyst at Hartwell Dynamics for 22 years. That's a fancy way of saying I'm the janitor for their money. I clean up the messes the big boys make when they play poker with the company credit card. I'm the invisible man. I wear gray. I speak only when spoken to. I exist in the spreadsheets and the back room. But that Friday night was the annual We Made a Profit Despite Our Best Efforts gala. Mandatory attendance. By the way, if you're into stories about invisible people dismantling empires brick by brick, hit that subscribe button. It keeps the lights on and the caffeine flowing. The evening started normally enough. Standard corporate purgatory with overpriced cocktails and underpriced souls. CEO William Hartwell was already 3 scotches deep, spilling 20-year-old liquor on a rug that cost more than my parents' house. The marketing VP was trying to snort something off his cufflink in the bathroom line. Just another Friday night with America's finest business leaders. I was standing near the shrimp tower trying to blend into the beige wallpaper, nursing a club soda that had lost its fizz about an hour ago. That's when he spotted me. Daniel Hartwell, the CEO's son. Picture everything wrong with generational wealth wrapped in a $3,000 suit. He's 28 years old, with skin that's never seen a day of real work and teeth that cost more than my annual 401k contribution. Trust fund baby with an MBA he bought from Stanford and 0 actual business experience. He swept into my corner of the room like a shark that had smelled blood in the water. Behind him trailed his usual entourage of sycophants and fellow trust fund babies, all eager to watch Daddy's little prince establish dominance over the help. I should mention the coat. It was draped over my arm because the coat check was full. A charcoal wool trench, practical and durable. I bought it at a thrift store 8 years ago for $15. It's got a loose button and smells faintly of old books. I love that coat. Daniel's eyes locked onto it like a heat-seeking missile. "Oh my God, Christopher," he announced, his voice pitched loud enough to cut through the jazz band's saxophone solo. "You're still wearing that thing? I swear I saw you in that exact coat at the Christmas party 3 years ago." The conversation around us started to die. It's amazing how quickly silence spreads when rich people smell an opportunity to watch someone get humiliated. The sport of kings, really. Watching the peasants squirm. "It's durable," I said, keeping my voice flat and steady. My pulse didn't even jump. After 22 years of corporate life, I've been insulted by experts. Daniel was clearly an amateur. "Durable?" Daniel laughed, and it sounded like glass breaking in a dishwasher. "That's one way to put it. Still shopping thrift stores, Chris? I thought senior analysts made decent money. Are things tight at home? Is that why you haven't upgraded? Saving up for a new one?" He leaned in closer, that predatory smile spreading across his face. He wanted me to stammer, to blush, to apologize for my existence. That's the currency these people trade in. Humiliation. The systematic destruction of dignity. It's how they maintain the hierarchy. But Daniel didn't know what was in my coat pocket. He didn't know that earlier that morning I'd finalized a leverage report showing that his daddy's visionary acquisition of a fintech startup was actually a hemorrhaging artery of debt about to turn this company into a smoking crater. He didn't know that I'd spent the last 22 years buying Class B non-voting shares every time the stock dipped, because William got caught with a mistress or tweeted something racist. Small purchases, $1,500 to $3,000 at a time. Every month, without fail. While other people bought boats and vacations, I bought patience. Over 2 decades, I'd accumulated 8% of the company. I looked Daniel dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I let the silence hang there until it got awkward, until his confident smile started to twitch at the corners, until the crowd of onlookers leaned in to hear what the office furniture was going to squeak. "No, Daniel," I said, my voice carrying just enough to reach the CFO standing 3 feet away. "I'm not saving up for a coat. I'm saving up to buy this company." For exactly 2 seconds, nobody moved. It was like I'd just pulled the pin from a grenade and set it gently on the hors d'oeuvres table. Then Daniel threw back his head and brayed with laughter. "Oh, that's rich," he gasped, wiping tears from his eyes. "Did everyone hear that? The calculator thinks he's a capitalist." "Oh, Christopher, you're absolutely adorable. Never change." He reached out and patted my shoulder with the kind of condescending affection you'd show a confused child. "That's precious. Really, I love your confidence." The crowd laughed along because that's what you do when the prince finds something amusing. You laugh so you don't get stung. They all thought it was hilarious, the idea that someone making $67,000 a year could threaten their empire. I watched Daniel saunter away, dragging his audience with him like a comet trailing debris. I watched William refill his glass with shaking hands, a tremor I'd noticed developing over the last 3 board meetings. I watched the VP of sales checking his phone frantically, probably reading the same internal memo I'd drafted 3 hours earlier about the Q3 projections being a complete fabrication. They thought it was a joke. They thought I was office furniture that had momentarily malfunctioned. I put my coat on, buttoned it all the way up to the chin. It felt like armor. Game on, Daniel. Hope you kept the receipt for that attitude. I walked out of that gala past the valet-parked Ferraris and Teslas, got into my wheezing Honda, and sat there for a moment gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles were white, not from fear, from anticipation. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a burner phone. Just one number saved in it, belonging to a man named Edward Vance. Edward was the ousted co-founder who William had stabbed in the back 7 years ago in a boardroom coup that would have made Shakespeare proud. Edward still held a voting block of shares, Class C founder stock that everyone considered worthless because they carried no dividend yield and no voting rights. But those shares had one interesting feature buried in the corporate charter: boardroom access rights in the event of a financial crisis. And I was about to manufacture a crisis that would make the 2008 collapse look like a market hiccup. The next morning, the office buzzed with that frantic energy you see in an anthill right after some kid kicks it. I walked in at 7:55 a.m., same as always, scanned my badge, the only greeting I ever got, and headed to my cubicle in the back corner of the finance floor. They call it the silo, where they put people who actually do the work so the executives don't have to look at us while practicing their putting. My desk is a fortress of paper stacks, 3 monitors, and a half-dead succulent named Asset. I fired up the terminal and took a sip of my lukewarm bodega coffee. It tasted like burnt hazelnuts and regret. Perfect fuel for corporate warfare. While the rest of the floor gossiped about Daniel's trust fund or William's latest DUI, I opened a hidden partition on my hard drive. To the IT department, this folder looked like archived tax records from 2014. Boring, dense, untouchable. To me, it was the war room. I clicked open a spreadsheet titled Project Guillotine. 22 years of being handed the grunt work had given me something more valuable than a corner office: the skeleton key to every dirty secret in this building. I knew the VP of operations was funneling supply chain kickbacks through a Delaware shell company. I knew the CFO was cooking books to hide that our flagship software was stolen code we were about to get sued over. I knew William had leveraged his personal shares to cover gambling debts in Atlantic City. But knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is just potential energy. Power is knowing when to pull the trigger. I tabbed over to MarketWatch. Hartwell Dynamics was trading at $45.20. "Not for long," I muttered. Then I opened the internal communications channel. I had access to the private executive chats, not through hacking, but because Catherine, the executive assistant William screamed at daily, had given me her password 3 years ago to help format a PDF. She never changed it. Why? Would she? I was just Christopher. Christopher helps. Christopher fixes things. The panic was already starting, CFO to CEO. "William, the acquisition rumors are hitting the financial blogs. Seeking Alpha just posted a piece questioning our debt ratios." CEO: "Kill it. Buy ads if necessary. Call our media contacts." CFO: "We don't have cash flow for a media blitz. The credit lines are maxed out. And William, there's another problem." CEO: "What now?" CFO: "The dividend payment to preferred shareholders bounced yesterday. The bank flagged the transfer due to insufficient operational funds." I smiled. The Seeking Alpha piece? I'd provided that raw data to a freelance journalist who needed a scoop. Anonymous source, completely untraceable. But the bounced dividend payment? That was a gift from William's own stupidity. You see, the corporate charter required quarterly dividend payments to preferred shareholders. If the company missed 3 consecutive payments, certain restrictions on founder shares were automatically lifted. William had been borrowing money to make those payments for 2 years, maintaining the illusion of profitability. But yesterday, he'd authorized a $75,000 transfer for Daniel's new BMW from the operational account. The bank's automated systems flagged the account for insufficient funds when the dividend payment tried to process 12 hours later. As of midnight last night, Edward Vance's worthless Class C shares had regained their voting rights. My burner phone buzzed. I texted back, 4:00 p.m., the place with the terrible scones. The tea shop was a relic, like Edward himself. Smelled of lavender and dust, located in a part of town that gentrification had considered and politely declined. Perfect. No polished executives would be caught dead eating these scones. Edward sat in the back booth, looking like a disgraced wizard who'd traded his robes for tweed. 70 years old, with wild white hair and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. He was reading an actual newspaper because of course he was. "Christopher," he grunted without looking up. "You look tired, like you've been carrying a mountain." "Just a company, Edward," I said, sliding into the booth. "How's retirement treating you?" "Boring. Golf is a waste of a good walk, and my grandchildren only call when they need money." He folded his paper. "Why are we here? You haven't contacted me in 5 years. Last time you saved me from a tax audit that would have stripped me clean." "I did." I pulled out a manila folder. "You owe me for that." "I know. Is this you calling in the debt?" "I'm doubling down." I slid the folder across the sticky table. Edward opened it. His eyebrows shot up as he scanned internal memos, acquisition data, leverage reports, photos of William's offshore banking records. "Jesus, Christopher. This is a death certificate." "It's a foreclosure notice," I corrected. "William has systematically looted this company. Stripped assets, inflated debt, alienated talent. The stock's going to crater within the month." Edward snorted. "Good, let it burn." "No," I said firmly. "We let him burn. The company has good bones, the engineers, support staff, people in the trenches doing real work. They don't deserve unemployment because William wanted another yacht." Edward studied me carefully. "What's the play?" "Your shares. As of yesterday, they have voting power again." William missed the quarterly dividend payment. Edward's hands started trembling as he processed this. "Does he know?" The notification went to his old email address, the one I still monitor. I leaned forward. "Edward, I can't buy you out. Don't have millions. But I can offer you something better. Which is revenge. Proxy those shares to me. Give me the weapon to destroy the man who destroyed you." Edward stared out the window for a long moment, tasting freedom for the first time in 7 years. "You're risking everything, Christopher. If this fails, he'll blacklist you from the entire industry." "I'm 47, Edward. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, and the boss's son just asked if I shop at thrift stores. I don't have a life to lose. I have a job to finish." Something like respect flickered in Edward's eyes. "You're not the janitor, are you?" "I'm the reset button," I said. He pulled out a fountain pen and signed the proxy document without hesitation. "When you fire him, tell William it was me who sharpened the axe." "I'll do better," I said, tucking the folder into my coat. "I'll let you swing it." The first domino had fallen. They just hadn't heard the click yet. By Wednesday, the atmosphere at Hartwell Dynamics felt less like a corporate office and more like a bunker during an air raid. The second article had dropped at 6:00 a.m. Toxic leadership and financial mismanagement. Inside the executive suite of Hartwell Dynamics, it was surgical. The piece detailed 3 separate harassment settlements William had paid using company slush funds, offshore accounts linked to the Cayman Islands, and the suspicious timing of stock sales by key executives. I didn't name victims, I'm not a monster, but I provided dates, amounts, and specific account numbers that any forensic accountant could verify in about 20 minutes. The stock opened at $38 and plummeted to $32.50 by lunch. My phone buzzed with a buy order confirmation. Another 200 shares at the dip. I was microwaving soup that smelled like sodium and disappointment when she stormed into the break room. Not Daniel this time, his stepmother, Michelle Hartwell, William's third wife, a former pharmaceutical sales rep who'd traded her company car for a trophy-wife Mercedes about 5 years ago. She spotted me immediately. Of course she did. You, she snapped, marching over in heels that clicked like a metronome set to panic. Do you know how to work the industrial shredder? I paused the microwave. I'm familiar with most office equipment, Michelle. What do you need? William's office. There are boxes, old files. They need to disappear before the lawyers arrive. Tomorrow for some audit bullshit. Her voice cracked slightly. God, why is everyone so incompetent? William is trying to save this company from these liars in the press, and you people just stand around eating soup. I'm on my lunch break, Michelle. I don't care what break you're on. Get up there, now. She stormed out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and desperation. I smiled. They were making mistakes now. Panic makes people stupid, and stupid people leave evidence. I went up to the executive floor. Pure chaos. Assistants crying into phones. VPs shouting at lawyers. William's door was closed, but I could hear him screaming at someone about incompetent damage control and finding the leak. In the copy room adjacent to his office, Michelle had left 6 banker boxes marked 2018 to 2020 MISC. She wanted them shredded. I opened the first box. It wasn't miscellaneous anything. Hard copies of the offshore transaction logs, the ones they thought they'd deleted from the servers. Physical trophies of their financial crimes. Arrogant and stupid. The perfect combination. I didn't shred them. I wheeled the cart down the hall, past the shouting and panic. When William's secretary Brenda asked where I was taking them, I told her Michelle wanted them in the basement incinerator for security protocol. She was too exhausted to care. I didn't go to the basement. I went to the parking garage, loaded 6 boxes of incriminating evidence into my Honda, and covered them with a gym blanket. Then I went back upstairs and spent an hour feeding blank paper through the shredder while checking stock prices. The next morning, Nicholas Thorne sent the notice. Subject line, Emergency Board Meeting. Review of Leadership and Strategic Direction. Corporate speak for Prepare the Firing Squad. William went nuclear. I could hear him from 3 floors down, screaming at Nicholas about betrayal and loyalty. But Nicholas was one of the few board members who actually read my reports. He was also 58 years old, a former engineer who remembered when companies made things instead of just shuffling money around. He'd been sidelined by William's cronies for years. I'd approached him 2 days earlier on the roof during his secret smoking break. Nice coat, he'd said without turning around. It's practical, I'd replied, like honest financial reporting. Rough day ahead, he'd sighed, exhaling Parliament smoke. Rough decade, really. The numbers you send up, we're bleeding out. The bleeding can stop, I'd said quietly, if we amputate the infected limb. That's when I'd shown him the folder, the evidence, the proxy documents. His face had gone through about 6 different expressions before settling on grim determination. You realize what you're asking me to do? I'm asking you to save 340 jobs, Nicholas, starting with your own. Friday morning arrived like Judgment Day. The boardroom was a glass-walled fishbowl where sharks were about to eat their own. I wasn't invited, officially. I was just the analyst. But I had a live audio feed patched through the conference room system I'd repaired last month. At 10:20 a.m. sharp, I took the elevator to the penthouse floor. The mahogany double doors were closed. I could hear raised voices through the wood. I didn't knock. I pushed the doors open. Every head turned. William, Daniel, Nicholas, Patrick Lawson, the board chairman, 3 other board members, 2 lawyers. William looked at me like I was a janitor who'd wandered into the wrong room. Christopher, what the hell? Get out. We're in session. Daniel stood up, his face twisted in that familiar sneer. Did you come to empty the trash cans, old man? This is a private meeting. I didn't look at them. I walked to the empty chair at the head of the table, directly opposite William. The room went silent except for the air conditioning. I pulled out the chair. I sat down. You asked who holds Edward Vance's proxy, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. I reached into my coat, my armor, and pulled out the signed documents. I slid them across the polished mahogany table where they stopped perfectly in front of Patrick. I do. William's face went white. Actually white. Like someone had just drained all the blood from his head. You're the analyst, he stammered. You make $67,000 a year. And I invest 35% of it, I replied. Compound interest is a beautiful thing, William. 22 years of small purchases every month. I own 8% of this company personally. Edward's proxy gives me another 8%. Combined with Nicholas and the others, I gestured around the table. We are the majority. Daniel's mouth fell open. You're lying. Patrick examined the proxy documents, his expression growing more serious by the second. These are valid, he announced. Mr. Mills holds the voting block. He has the floor. I laced my fingers together on the table and looked directly at William. Shall we begin? The room exploded. William slammed his fist on mahogany. Daniel started yelling about lawsuits and illegality, but it was too late. The reset button had been pushed. Motion to remove William Hartwell as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately, Nicholas said, his voice steady as granite. For cause, financial malfeasance, breach of fiduciary duty, and gross incompetence. Seconded, came a voice from the doorway. We all turned. Linda Morrison stood there, the 73-year-old widow of the company's other co-founder. She'd been a silent partner for a decade, showing up only for annual meetings. Today, she leaned on her walking cane like it was a weapon. Linda, William croaked, his voice breaking like a teenager's. You can't be serious. Deadly serious, William. She hobbled into the room with surprising dignity. My husband built this company to mean something. You've turned it into your personal piggy bank. She looked directly at me. Young man, you have my vote. William was hyperventilating now. Daniel looked around the room like a drowning man searching for a life preserver, but the other board members were studying their iPads, watching the stock price, calculating their own survival. All in favor of the motion? Patrick called. Hands went up around the table. Nicholas, Linda, two other board members who'd been reading my reports for years. Then a fifth hand, then a sixth. It was unanimous except for William's cronies, who sat frozen in their chairs. Motion carries, Patrick announced, bringing down his gavel like a judge's sentence. William Hartwell, you are hereby relieved of all executive duties, effective immediately. William didn't speak. He just sat there, deflated, like someone had pulled his plug. After 30 seconds of silence, he stood up shakily, took his jacket from the chair, and walked toward the door. He didn't look at Daniel. He didn't look at anyone. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Daniel was on his feet, pointing at me with a trembling finger. This is illegal. This is corporate theft. I'll have you arrested. Sit down, son, Patrick said quietly. It's over. Daniel looked around the room one more time, realized his kingdom had just crumbled, and ran after his father. Dad, wait! I sat there as the adrenaline drained out of my system, leaving my hands shaking slightly. 22 years of preparation, 22 years of invisible patience, and it was finished in 15 minutes. So, Patrick said, looking at me, we have no CEO. The stock is in free fall. The press is camped outside. What now, Mr. Mills? Now, I said, taking a deep breath, we get to work. 3 months later, the transition hadn't been easy. The stock had wobbled between $28 and $35 for weeks before stabilizing at $41. The press was initially skeptical. Can the mystery analyst save Hartwell? But skepticism turned to cautious optimism when our Q4 numbers came in 12% above projections. I'd sold the corporate jet immediately. That money covered severance packages for the deadweight executives I'd fired. I renegotiated our crushing debt with 3 different banks, showing them real numbers instead of William's fantasy spreadsheets. When they saw actual transparency, they were willing to work with us. I promoted the engineers who'd been building our actual products and eliminated the middle management layer that existed solely to forward emails and attend meetings about meetings. The culture was slowly healing. People were leaving at reasonable hours. Laughter was returning to break rooms. I was sitting in the CEO's office, my office now, which I'd completely stripped. Gone were the expensive Persian rugs, the mahogany wet bar, the putting green, just a desk, a conference table, a whiteboard covered in actual strategy, and my coat hanging on a simple coat rack in the corner. My assistant buzzed the intercom, Catherine, who I'd promoted and given a 30% raise. She'd have taken a bullet for me now. Christopher, there's a visitor. Says it's urgent. Who is it? Daniel Hartwell. I paused. I hadn't heard from him since that day in the boardroom. Word through the corporate gossip network was that William had fled to the Cayman Islands with whatever offshore money he could access, abandoning his son completely. Send him in. The door opened. Daniel walked in, and I barely recognized him. Gone was the $3,000 suit, replaced by khakis and a button-down shirt that looked like it came from Target. His hair was unstyled. His confident swagger had been replaced by something that looked almost like humility. He stood in front of my desk. He didn't sit down uninvited. "What can I do for you, Daniel?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. He cleared his throat. "I need a job." I finally looked up. "Excuse me?" "Dad left me," he said, his voice small and hollow. "Took all the liquid assets and disappeared. The trust fund was apparently just smoke and mirrors, all leveraged against company stock that he'd already used as collateral. I've got about $3,000 in my checking account and maxed out credit cards." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I have an MBA. I know it doesn't mean much without experience, but I can learn. I can work. I need this." I studied him. The arrogant prince who'd mocked my coat was gone, replaced by a scared 28-year-old who'd just discovered that the real world has teeth. The vindictive part of me wanted to laugh, wanted to tell him to apply at Starbucks, wanted to crush him the way he'd tried to crush me, but that's what William would have done. That's what the old Hartwell dynamics would have done. I wasn't William. "We have an opening," I said finally. "Junior financial analyst, entry level. The salary is $43,000 a year." Daniel flinched like I'd slapped him. That's barely above minimum wage." "It's a start," I said. "You'll report to Timothy Brooks. He's the new director of financial analysis. You'll do grunt work. Data entry, filing, coffee runs when needed. You'll be invisible." He looked at the floor for a long moment, processing the complete reversal of his universe. When he looked up, there was something different in his eyes. Maybe the beginning of actual character. "I'll take it," he said quietly. "Good. Start Monday, 8 o'clock a.m. Sharp." I paused. "And Daniel?" "Yes." "In this office, we don't comment on people's clothes. You never know who's wearing them." His cheeks burned red, but he nodded. "Understood." After he left, I walked to the coat rack and touched the rough wool of my trench coat. 8 years old, $15 from a thrift store, still missing that same button. It wasn't just clothing anymore. It was a reminder of where I'd come from and what mattered. I put it on and walked out of my office, past Catherine, past the busy floor of people working together towards something meaningful. The company was safe. The monster was gone. And the invisible man? He was finally seen.